All right, welcome to another edition of the Mets Way. I don't got my three other hosts now that Drew's a part of this. My three other hosts aren't here with me tonight. They all got stuff to do tonight, work, and Drew's got a soccer game, actually, that he's at, so good luck to Drew in his soccer game. But to the right of me, I'm sure you can all see, joining me is my editor over at the Rise and Apple blog, and actually the site expert too at the Rise and Apple blog of FanSided, and he also writes for the FanSided site itself for the MLB site. For pretty good, a lot of good articles if you want to check out his Mets articles over at the Rise and Apple. He also covers the Mets for FanSided as well, and all of baseball as well, so you can check out his articles there. But thank you, Tim, for joining me. Anything you want to say before we get into it?
Gray hoodies are the best.
Yes, they are. We both got gray hoodies. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, a little twin match, and here we go. But overall, before we do get straight into this Mets news, let's talk about some Mets history. Who is like your favorite all-time Met? Who would you say is your guy growing up, and your guy maybe even right now? Who's your favorite all-time Met, and who's your guy currently?
I mean, I like the scrappy guys. I fall into that category, so I'm really like Jeff McNeil. He'd probably be my favorite going right now. In terms of history, I mean, if I stay with that theme, it would have to be Joe McEwing, which it absolutely isn't. I don't know. I grew up playing catcher when I was younger, so and I started getting into baseball conveniently in 1996. So I guess Todd Hundley would probably be one of my first favorites. And I swear I saw him look at me on TV when I was younger at a game, but he was just looking in my general direction. So I guess he would have to be a quiet favorite from the past.
Yeah, my go-to guy all time is actually David Wright. I mean, I know it's a cliche answer, but yeah, that's a good one though. I like that. That's out of the box one kind of.
Wright's good too. I remember the first time I actually saw him live was in the South Atlantic League. It's like kind of mid-level in the All-Star game, and I met him. I didn't really know what he was ever going to become, and he was really nice. Signed a bunch of baseball cards for me. So he was like probably one of the few future stars I got to see in that game.
That's actually awesome. I was actually taking a look at David Wright's numbers the other day because I was just me and a couple of buddies. We were just playing MLB The Show. We were in an Xbox party, and one of my friends came across like a David Wright throwback card, and then we just started spitting it, and I was like, guys, I think David Wright should be a Hall of Famer. And then we had that whole entire debate. But just looking at his numbers, I want to ask you, since you're so big into the Mets and, you cover the Mets with the FanSided and Rise and Apple, you're the chief guy over there. So what are your thoughts on David Wright's career as a whole? And since there's been a lot of talk about the whole entire Hall of Fame drama recently, this last class, do you think David Wright should get a nod at the Hall of Fame, even if it's not first ballot?
Unfortunately, I'm to disappoint you. I don't think he's quite there. The narrative might change if he had one more monster season. I think it was either 2006 or 2007, one of those years. He was an elite hitter. He was an elite fielder. One more year like that really puts him in the conversation. I don't remember the number offhand, and I know WAR isn't the end-all be-all statistic, but he was around like 60, 62, but another year of 8, that puts him in the 70 category, and that's right there with Roland, Beltran, 2 other players who they were never the best in the league, but they could hit. They won a bunch of gold gloves, and that's kind of what Wright was, but the injuries are really what brings him down. He just didn't have enough of a career. It's kind of like, I know it's not the same comparison, but like Johan Santana, at his peak, nobody was a better pitcher, but it just ended way too early. So I don't think Wright will get in. It will be interesting to see, though. Does he get enough votes to stay on the ballot? A lot of the New York writers, a lot of the people that watched him, I think they're going to toss him a vote. Johnny Peralta's, those guys get votes every once in a while, guys that don't belong in the Hall of Fame. So he's definitely gonna get some of those votes, but is he gonna crack close to 50. I don't know about that. When guys that are definite Hall of Famers aren't even getting that high. So I'll be interested to see how long he actually lasts on the ballot, but I don't think he will get in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pulling for him. I'm really hoping he gets it just because, childhood. That's the
Yeah.
guy, number 5. That's like I kind of compare. I know he didn't win an MVP like the guy I'm about to compare him to in a different sport, but I always compare him to my friends with Derrick Rose kind of. He comes onto the scene, bursts onto the scene at such a young age and literally just lights it up, like eye-opening numbers, one of the best at his position. And then, he just gets that injury. D Rose obviously tore his ACL and then right with his back and his neck. It's unfortunate, but I've never really like talked about it much on this podcast, but I feel like David Wright and Derrick Rose, kind of two different sports, obviously, but very good comparison, I think, in my opinion, like injury wise and where they could have been if it weren't for the injuries that they sustained. But sticking with the Hall of Fame and snubs, is Keith Hernandez a Hall of Famer in your opinion?
I think he has a really good case. I think, and I was after all the Hall of Fame stuff has been going on, I kind of looked back. You might know, but was he? I think he was only on one ballot before he got knocked off, and it was a really low number of votes. I might be wrong, but he was never even close. I don't know if the drug issues, maybe some other problems that he had back in the day, kind of him in the balloting. It's interesting. I guess his first year on the ballot was around 95, probably. He probably retired like 90, 91-ish. So I don't know. It's interesting to see that he was never even close. But I think he definitely has the numbers. He has the MVP. He has 2 championships with 2 different teams. He has all the more Gold Gloves than the other first baseman. And things like that matter a whole lot more. So I think he would be a guy that could get in on a future one of those era committee ballots. I don't recall him actually being on one because he would be in the same era as, say, like a Dale Murphy, one of those guys, or Lou Whitaker. His time, I know he's not signed to actually be in the booth this coming year, which is a big concern for a lot of Mets fans. But I think the more he stays kind of in the media will help his cause, unless he keeps going on the wrong types of shows that kind of he's been on like Tucker Carlson and stuff like that, which that's actually might end up hurting him because the voters tend to have their personal opinions. And I mean, that's the reason why Curt Schilling's not in the Hall of Fame, really, is because his political beliefs. And sadly, that might end up hurting Keith Hernandez in the end. But yeah, I think he belongs in there.
Yeah, I'm pulling for Keith too to get in that on that next ballot that he gets on the error committee. I think he should get it, and I think he will actually get it. But speaking of him and sticking with the SNY, what are your overall thoughts? The SNY booth is obviously one of the best in baseball. Not just Mets fans love it, baseball fans love it. The MLB always putting their content out there just because of how good Gary Cohen is and Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling and their chemistry. So do you think if Keith does leave, do you think that'll affect the booth at all? And with Ron Darling, I think he's kind of part-time. He's not there every single game. I know Keith is there every single game. So what do you think the effect would be for Mets fans not having Keith in the booth and potentially having a new face next to Gary Cohen and Ron Darling?
I think the biggest problem is going to be for whoever tries to fill those shoes because they're gonna have a lot of trouble. I mean, I guess Greg Olson can step in now. He's out of a job, unfortunately, over in the NFL. But it's a tough thing because I'm trying to think who would even be a good candidate to replace him, who has that personality. Because you want someone somewhat similar, but you can't be exactly the same. And maybe there's some minor player that has a connection with the Mets in the past that could step in, has a personality that would be a good fit. But even then, I'm just not sure who's going to fill those shoes. And the chemistry is going to be completely different. It might not be a bad thing, but it's going to be a different thing. And I don't believe people are going to be able to accept that right away, no matter how good the replacement is.
Yeah, Keith is definitely – he makes that booth so good. He's funny, and he knows the game. He knows what it takes to be a New Yorker. And I think the biggest thing that I love about the SNY booth is they're not afraid to critique the New York Mets. Whereas you see a lot of teams booth, they'll react in a negative way when their team is doing bad. Where the Mets, they're the same throughout the whole entire. Obviously, they're pulling for the Mets more than the other team, but they're not going to just go out there and completely bash the other team just because they're killing the Mets. But just one more topic before we get into the actual players and the actual roster this year. So with the boot this year and, everything going on in Mets world since Steve Cohen bought this new team, the stadium's changing, apparently there's reports of malls being built out there, parking lots changing and expanding. So now that we're heading into this like new era, it almost seems with the Mets with Steve Cohen. And now that we have a Super Bowl commercial apparently coming up this year, what do you think as like a culture in the Mets? Where do you see this whole entire franchise headed? Do you see it in the direction of like a maybe not championship wise, but on the same level as a LA Lakers, New York Yankees, Barcelona type team, like the value of it, or do you think we're gonna be hard to get up there?
You really know all about the different sports, throwing out the Barcelona. I believe that's the correct pronunciation with the lift. But and I know more about accents than I do soccer. But anyway, I see it seems to be trending that the Mets are like the cool team in New York, and the Yankees are the lame kind of do-gooders. It's kind of, I don't know. I feel like just in entertainment in general, we go through phases where there's the traditional good guys, and then we get the anti-heroes, the Walter Whites from Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy, these types of anti-heroes. And it's not quite the same. The Mets don't really have the bad boy attitude about them. They never really in the 80s, they had that attitude. This team is completely different, but still they feel like the cool team because Steve Cohen's doing anti-owner things that help out the fans. They're really building up a culture. And, the Yankees, their identity is their history, and that's just boring at this point. I think the Mets really have a chance to become that cool team in New York, and it's a great opportunity for them. Not that many teams in the city, as many as there are that cool. I mean, the Nets have a great chance to be it, but the city hasn't embraced them. The Knicks have been a mess forever. Hockey's hockey, but the Mets really have a chance to be that team that they were in the 80s, where it seems like a lot of celebrities are embracing them, and they have the guy at the top who's really leading the way. They have some big personalities, and it seems to be coming together for them. So I could see them kind of a culture shift where the celebrities who want to be a baseball fan, they just want to be cool about it, are going to go to the Mets games instead of the Yankees games.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely got the stars now. We have the stars: Verlander, Scherzer, Alonso, who's a homegrowner, which is pretty cool to see that these homegrown guys. Alonso still hasn't gotten his extension, but Nimmo and one guy recently, Jeff McNeil, who you mentioned earlier as a scrappy guy, who I think every Mets fan loves. He's the guy. I got him on a bobblehead actually right back here. McNeil is the GOAT, not obviously the GOAT, but like GOAT in fan world, just because batting champion, obviously the reigning defending batting champion, and he's just an on base hitting machine. So what are your thoughts on this 4-year extension, and what do you expect to see from Jeff McNeil in 2023 and beyond?
I think it's a great deal. I mean, that was the first reaction everyone had. Wow, that's it. There must be a mistake somewhere. Where's the extra zero? It's an affordable deal. I think in the last 2 years, it comes out to a little over 15 million. There's a team option for a fifth year on it. There's nothing to dislike about the deal they signed with him. He can do so much too, that even if for some reason he falls off a cliff, he's just an expensive utility man. And that's not such a bad thing to have. He has so much room to go down that there's no, even if all he does is the performance from 2021 where he wasn't the same, which he's not going to do, by the way. Even if that was the case in one or two of the years, it's still very much worth it. I don't think he'll have quite as good of a year in 2023. I think 2022 was probably his peak season, but he's still going to hit over 300. He's done it every year except for 2021 when everybody seemed to kind of take the year off from hitting. I don't know what the problem was that season. I know there's been some speculation in the past about how their approach at the plate was just thrown off. They wanted them to focus on their launch angles and all that other analytical nonsense that gets too in their head. So I don't know. I think he'll compete for a batting title. He might even win another one, but I don't think he'll be quite as high of a batting average. It's rare to hit 300 these days, but yeah, I think he'll have a similar year. Batting average drop maybe 10 points, but it'll still look fantastic in the end.
Yeah, I love the idea of giving Jeff that 4-year extension too. And like you said, I think 2022 is definitely his peak year, but that does not mean it's downhill from here. It's just, yeah, he's going to be hitting above 300, and that 2021 year, it was just a little blur. Obviously the approaches at the plate, the speculation, like you mentioned, maybe they're trying to be a little bit too power hitting friendly. But now he's back to his normal approach, but he's got that knobless bat, which not even Mets fans love. MLB fans as a whole, they always point that out, like, hey, that guy's got a knobless bat. It works because he's one of the best hitters in the MLB. But actually, just going back to the TV thing, before we get into our next topic, just because one of our commenters, Zach actually commented right here. I'm going to put it right up. Yeah, he said that probably wouldn't happen, but Curtis Granderson would be an awesome.
I would be.
Yeah, great personality. Yeah, I think that would actually be a perfect replacement. If Keith were to go, if we could seal the deal with Curtis Granderson, who actually had a really good year in 2015. Like, I think he had like an OPS almost at 900. I was looking at his stats from 2015 the other day. He was like one of our best players that year. So, I mean, I know he didn't have the years he did with the Yankees, with the Mets, but Granderson was a solid piece for the Mets during his years, and he was one of the better hitters, especially on that 2015 team. One of the main reasons we got to where we got to. So what would you think about Granderson in the booth, though? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good suggestion. He'd be very different from Keith, but I think he would know his role and he'd be able to catch on very quickly. Speaking, he's a very good speaker. Of course, I forget the exact quote when he first signed with the Mets, but it was something along the lines of "This is the best team. This is the better team than New York." He basically shaded the Yankees as soon as he switched over to the Mets, which was pretty cool, and people remember that all these years later. So I think he would actually be a pretty good choice. The only thing I would worry about again is that it's going to be different, but I think because he is very memorable in recent memory too, that people would embrace him.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I think it would appeal to a lot of the younger Mets fans, like you just mentioned, especially that the fact that he was in a World Series too with the New York Mets. So I think that would be. Oh, I'm just spamming the comments now just because my laptop screwed up there. But yeah, I think just him being in a World Series, the insight that he would bring, being a Met and a Yankee. I also think, I'm not sure what this announcement is going to be, but if I had to predict this little Super Bowl commercial, I think SNY might make a move to be like on a national level now, not just local. That would be my guess. My little surprise. So I feel like Curtis Granderson might actually be a good idea if Cohen wants to take this team, to new heights. Kind of like the Kelsey podcast a little.
Yeah, he'd be a good choice too because he's played for a couple of teams. I know I don't know if he finished with the Dodgers, but he was with the Tigers, of course, for a couple of years. So he's well known around the game. So yeah, that would I didn't even think about that. I haven't had any thought of what the commercial would be for in the Super Bowl, but it's got to be something big and a whole network devoted to Mets. Other stuff too. I think that would really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think anything that Steve Cohen announces, Mets fans are just gonna we're just gonna eat it up just because he's the guy. He's our guy. But back to baseball talk. Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil's boy, his All-Star mate at this point, because they always go into the All-Star game together. But Pete Alonso and McNeil, they kind of got that little duo package going. And now that Nimmo got his deal and so did McNeil, the one guy left is Pete Alonso. He obviously just signed the highest arbitration deal that a first baseman has ever received in MLB history, but still waiting on that extension. So when do you think Pete Alonso gets that extension, or even if he gets that extension, and what do you think that number would look like?
I think he will get it. I don't think it's going to happen before opening day. In the middle of the season, those things, I don't have any number to back it up, but it seems like they kind of brush that stuff aside. But I think talks will be ongoing in the season. It's not something he's going to be focused on, maybe in passing his agent, but I do think it'll get done. I know John Morosi predicted, I believe it was something around 8 years, 200 million was kind of his estimate. I guess that's a good number. He based it a lot on the I think it was either the Matt Olson or the Austin Riley contracts that the Braves handed out, one of those two. I think that's a fair number though, because it comes out to about 25 million a year. I don't know. I think the longer they wait, the more that price will go up, and not necessarily because Pete does better, but maybe just because the price tag of superstars is going up. They always seem to go up. So yeah, I would say 200 million is automatically, but I think it could probably get closer to 225, 230 in the end. 8 years seems fair as well. The DH in the National League will make sure that he's around for a long time. The only question then would become, what do you do with Shohei Ohtani?
Yeah, that's a topic that I kind of wanted to get into a little bit later, but yeah, just before we do get into Ohtani, though, I'm sure you see the overlay Alonso MVP. Obviously he's one of the best first basemen in the game right now, one of the best power hitters in the game right now. But what do you think Alonso has to do to reach that next step and become a top 10, top 5 player in this league and not just a top 5 first baseman?
He needs to change his name to Paul Goldschmidt and do everything that Paul Goldschmidt does. That's the only chance he has. But now, if he becomes a better defender, I think that's going to go a long way. He doesn't have to be a Gold Glove caliber, but just a little bit better. The trouble is that he's competing against other first basemen, and that's such a power position, such an RBI position. Freddie Freeman can hit 22 home runs, but he'll hit 320, 330 in a season, and it'll look better. People forget that in 2019, when Pete Alonso hit, 53 home runs, Freddie Freeman won the Silver Slugger that year, which is kind of ridiculous to think about. Pete definitely should have been the winner of it. I mean, what's more sluggerish than hitting 50 home runs?
Yeah, it broke the rookie record.
Yeah, it broke a lot of records. For him to win the MVP, it's tough because the way the Mets are built, Lindor is going to get a lot of the attention too if Alonso has an MVP caliber season. He's going to have about 140 RBI easily. He's going to have to hit 50 home runs again. He's going to have to at least come close to hitting 300. So if we just look at his numbers last year, he had 40 home runs, 131 RBI. If he raises that batting average another 20, 25 points, which over the span of a full season is only really about another 20 not even 20 hits. That's really going to put him in the conversation, especially if the Mets run away with the division. I know that hasn't mattered all the time in the past with MVP voting, but I think in his case, he's going to need a little bit of help. He is likable. People seem to really like him, the voters and stuff. He doesn't come off as a bad guy as much as he tries. He's dorky. He's a dorky villain at that home run derby. He is a dorky arrogance about him, so I don't think that's gonna hurt him. It's fun. So yeah, he needs to improve on the areas of his weakness to really be in the MVP conversation. He's become a better fielder, but more importantly, he has to raise his batting average. And he doesn't have to do that to be successful, but if he's going to win the MVP, and he keeps getting better every year, he's cut down on the strikeouts immensely. I forget what the rate, but it was way less than 1 per game last season. So he's on his way to getting closer and this year. So hopefully he gets it.
Yeah, he's entering the prime of his career right now, and he's not the face of the Mets, but he's the face of the homegrown Mets. But let's talk about in many eyes is the face of the Mets, since he's the highest paid Met. Well, not the highest paid Met annually, but 300, he's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
2022, he earned that paycheck, I think, in a lot of Mets fans' eyes. He definitely did. He had a much better year than he did in 2021. I think he just needed to get acclimated into New York. And, I've been on the record for saying that Lindor, I think he can be even better than he was in 2022. I know there's a lot of fans that have actually given me some backlash and said that, there's no way he can get better than what he is in 2022. But, just looking at his numbers before he came with the Mets, he was like a 300, 280 guy, 280 to 300 guy, 30 plus home runs guy. Obviously 2022, he was terrific and he had one of his best seasons yet. But in 2023, do you think he can be even better than he was in 2022? And do you think it's like crazy for a Mets fan to expect Francisco Lindor to be even better in 2023, considering he's got that talent?
I don't think he can be better. I think he needs to be better. He was a completely different player in his best days in Cleveland. He didn't in his early part of his career, he was a high average guy without much power. Then his average went down, but the power numbers went way up. One big difference I've noticed about his numbers is that he doesn't get doubles anymore. I know there's nothing romantic about the 2-base hit, but he had, I think, 25 doubles last year. He had 3 straight years in Cleveland with over 40 doubles and over 30 home runs. That's a big difference in a lot of numbers when you're doing things like that. So I think if he can just turn a couple singles into line drives into the gap, that's going to make a huge difference in his overall numbers. He's a good player, but you can definitely see where there are areas where he can improve numbers wise. We've seen it before when he was with his previous team. So I don't know. I wonder if moving the fences in right field might even make a little bit of difference when he goes the other way, or he can definitely be better, and I think he will be. As you said, 2021 was a year of just kind of getting acclimated to the city, the new life. Last year, he wasn't great. I know people like to point at certain numbers. Yeah, he was very good. He was very productive, but he's been better, and we know he can be even better this coming year.
Yeah, I'm excited for 2023 Francisco Lindor. I actually I had like a prediction in the Mets Way group chat of ours, and I said that Francisco Lindor is going to win the MVP. Even though I just put that Pete Alonso thing up, but yeah, I think Lindor's got what it takes to get back to that MVP level. He was a top 10. I mean, I know he slid into top 10 this year, right at 9, but he was a top 5 MVP candidate, when he was with Cleveland. And I know it's, some Mets fans, like you said, they'll point out some certain numbers, but at the same time, he can be better. He can be better. We know what he's capable of, and that's nothing taking away anything from 2022, but he's the type of player that has the capability to win an MVP. And if he's on playing like he played with Cleveland for the New York Mets, then that's we don't even need a player like Carlos Correa, in my opinion, because Lindor, if he's that guy for us, then we can wait for the Ohtani or the Machado next season. We don't need to go after, well, now that we can't even go after him anymore because he's with another team, but trade-wise, hopefully Lindor can be that impact bat that we gave him that 10-year deal to be. But yeah, flipping from Lindor, let's go to another high-paid player that came in here and started doing well after a couple of years of doing bad. Edwin Diaz, what do you think Mets fans can expect in 2023? Do you think he can replicate 2022 in any way, shape, or form, or do you think that's just an insane season?
That's an insane season, but I think he can replicate it. Closers are so tough to really be able to predict because it just takes one or two bad outings to completely change the narrative on them. I don't think it'll be quite as good numbers wise. I don't think he'll go on as many streaks that he went on, or the countless number of times where he just seemed to strike out everyone he faced. I don't think people are going to figure him out. He seems to be too good on the mound, and he's in the peak of his career. So I think he'll be just as good, maybe in some areas better, as long as he keeps working at it to continue to get better. And you know what? The way he was able to rebound from such a horrible 2019, he didn't just settle. Uh, you might even remember there were trade rumors in the past as halfway through that year, the Red Sox wanted him, but the Mets never did trade him, obviously. So he's worked hard, and I think we should give him credit for that. He's going to earn his paycheck as much as anybody can earn nearly $20 million to work an inning a night. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I think he'll be pretty. He'll be solid and trustworthy. I have little concerns about him.
Yeah, I'm pumped for Edwin Diaz. I think we got a good one for a long, long time with the New York Mets. And, it's finally we got a closer, something that's not a question mark, especially now that we got David Robertson now, too. This bullpen's looking pretty solid heading into 2023, something that we couldn't say before in the past, besides Edwin Diaz. Like, it's been Seth Lugo, and Lugo's great, but he's no David Robertson or Edwin Diaz,
Mm-hmm.
But just, quickly going through other things, you mentioned Ohtani earlier. But just quickly before we do get into Ohtani with the pitching and his hitting, what do you think about the quickest edition? The latest superstar edition of Justin Verlander? And what do you think he's going to be able to bring to this Max Scherzer at the top of the rotation, and potentially, I don't know who's going to be at the end and get that last spot. I saw you wrote an article actually, who's going to make the opening day roster and you were writing about McGill potentially getting the spot. So what are your thoughts on this rotation, and what do you think it's going to look like in 2023?
Well, I think the rotation's pretty set. I think it's going to be Verlander, Scherzer, Quintana, Senga, and Carrasco. McGill's probably going to be more of a swingman. I think Hefner has already confirmed that him and Peterson are going to be more stretched out the same way Peterson was used last year, rather than putting them in the bullpen, which I'm kind of interested to see if McGill or Peterson would actually benefit from being in the bullpen. The Verlander edition was fantastic. It was the only thing they could do after losing the one who shall be not be named, Jacques deGrom. But the rest of the rotation, I'm not so sure about. Senga's coming over from Japan, so he has a lot of adjustments to do with from a six-man rotation, the different baseballs. So him, I'm not so sure about. I'm confident enough. And Quintana, he's not going to really go more than 5 innings often. So I'm wondering if maybe they have something planned where they could even use McGill in a regular relief role behind Quintana, go from the lefty to the righty, have McGill give 2-3 innings. That's just an outside of the box idea I had. But yeah, Verlander, I'm not concerned about him. He just won the Cy Young. He just won a World Series. He's going to get the job done. There's nothing to panic about with him until something happens that we need to panic about.
Yeah, I mean, I saw actually, I'm not sure who wrote an article about it recently, but on the New York Post, it might have been Puma. I'm not sure, but it came out and said that Scherzer might have an innings limit of some sort. But like you said, I'm not too worried about any of those guys injury wise, just because we really just need them to, even if they don't throw 200 innings or 180 innings, just give me 150 plus and get me to the postseason and pitch a couple good games. And I think Scherzer definitely needs a redemption game in the postseason with the New York Mets. But let's fast forward to next offseason. Shohei Ohtani, Manny Machado, both going to be free agents, obviously. And that's a lot of Mets fans are looking forward there already in the direction of 2024 just because of those two big names. And anything's on the table now, obviously, with Steve Cohen as owner. And we're going to be at the table with every single free agent. So do you think it's set up for Ohtani to come to the New York Mets or potentially even Manny Machado? What do you think about that?
It seemed like a sure thing that Ohtani was coming to New York until it hasn't happened, and it's probably not going to happen this like before the end of the 2020. I don't even see them trade him at the deadline because that's going to cost too much, and it goes against the way they're holding onto their prospects tightly. And the way the offseason played out, I feel like the Dodgers are really waiting to make a play at him next season. They didn't spend much at all this offseason, and they're going to have space in their rotation at the DH spot next year. So I'm worried about them. Then there's the Giants, who missed out on two superstars they went after. They passed on Correa for the same reasons the Mets did. But they've got room to add Ohtani and more next offseason as well. Then there's even a team like the Cardinals, who their payroll is it's sort of right in the middle of the league, and I feel like they might even trade for him at the deadline. They have a ton of young talent that they can deal away and not miss a beat. So I'd be concerned about them trading for him and signing him to an extension immediately. I don't think that's as likely, but then there's always sleeper teams like the Seattle Mariners. We know they have their rich history with Japanese stars like Ichiro. So I'd worry about those teams trying to play. And the Mets do have other players they can pivot to. Like you said, Machado would be the obvious one to go after. Sign Machado, move Brett Beatty into left field, and let's play ball.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Anything, like I just said before, anything's on the table now that Steve Cohen is the owner of the New York Mets. So the Machados and the Otanis, once they were dreams with the Wilpons, but now it could potentially be reality. It's rumor mill now in Mets world. And it's awesome. We used to be on like Jeff Francoeurs. But yeah, Tim, I really want to say thank you again for joining. And before I do let you go, 2023, what's your overall prediction for Buck Showalter's New York Mets?
They are definitely not going to get eliminated in a game 3 of the wild card series and only getting one hit. They're going to go further than that. How far do they go after that? I'm going to need to see a little bit more, but it's not going to end with a whimper and one hit. That's for sure. That cannot happen at this time.
Yeah, I'm at the point where it's World Series or bust for me. I'm not sure about you, but I think anything less than World Series.
I feel like next year is more the World Series year than this year.
Yeah, I think if we were to fall short in the World Series, like make it like game 7 or even game 7 of the NLCS, I'll be okay with it like in a week. But if we fall short in like the divisional round or the wild card round, I think that's when I'll be like, this season was a bust. But if it's like a championship series, heartbreaking, like late series loss, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I feel like next year's more their year. This year's get over that hump and then go out all after it next year. When Alvarez, Beatty, they've gotten their jitters out of their way, and then they'll go after it. They'll have an even better lineup, and the pitching's going to stay relatively the same. So I think next year is the year to be really excited. But you know what? For 2023, let's see if they can surprise us.
Yeah, I'm pumped for it. You like those guys? You like the prospects a lot? You like Beatty and Alvarez? You think they can make a serious impact for a couple of years?
I think they absolutely can. Beatty more so. I'm concerned about any catcher, really. It doesn't matter how talented they are. I'd be worried that he gets beat up behind the plate. And that would be my biggest concern with him. The fact that Beatty can already move to left field from third base, that they've opened up that opportunity, really means that they're going to be committed to him. He's the last man standing from the Brody Van Wagenen draft era. So we really want to see that pay off.
Yeah, I love Beatty. He's got sick hair. He's a good kid, and he hits the ball so hard. Even his outs are hard outs. But yeah, thanks again for joining, Tim. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out the Rise in Apple over at FanSided, you can check out Tim's articles, and also on FanSided in the MLB section, he's got articles as well. Thank you again for joining. And anything you want to say before we hop off?
No. Thanks for having me. I'll be polite and I'll return a favor. This is fun.
Yeah, let's go Mets, and hopefully we can have you on again. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and let's go New York Mets, baby.